Let me tell you something I have never been able to keep to myself. There is a kind of betrayal that will never make the news. It won't show up on a police report. Nobody will write a headline about it. No one in the neighborhood will gather on the front lawn and shake their heads. Because from the outside, from every angle that the outside world can see, everything looks fine. The house is still standing. The last name is still shared. The ring is still on the finger. But inside that house, inside that marriage, something has been dying for months. Slowly, quietly, room by room. And the person doing the dying is not the one you'd expect. She is not screaming. She is not throwing things. She is not posting cryptic captions or calling her friends to dissect every argument. She is present. She is cooking his favorite meals. She is wearing the dress he once said made her look like a dream. She is trying, in every language of love she knows, to reach him. And he is not there. I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Not because this story is dramatic, though it is. Not because the twists are sharp, though they are. But because somewhere in this story, you are going to recognize something. A moment, a feeling, a version of yourself, or someone you love, or someone you were too late to hold on to. Here is the image I want you to carry into this story. A woman. Alone at a table she set herself. Candles she lit with her own hands. Food she made from love she hadn't stopped feeling. And at the end of the night, nobody coming. Nobody sitting across from her. Nobody seeing her. She blows out those candles by herself, one by one by one. And she does not make a sound. That image? That is not a metaphor. That is a Tuesday night in a real marriage. And this is that story. Before we go one step further, if you are new to this channel, welcome home. Wounds Among Kin is where we tell the stories that other people are too polished to admit are real. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and stay close. And if you have been here before, you already know why you don't leave. You already know what this feels like. This one is going to require something from you, not just your attention, your honesty. Stay with me. This is the story of Corwin Hale and Maria Lister Hale, and how one man's blindness, slow, chosen, inexcusable, nearly cost him the only love in his life that was ever truly, completely, unreservedly real. Corwin Hale was 31 years old when he first saw Maria Lister across a crowded room at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Atlanta. And I want you to understand, she wasn't performing, she wasn't working the room. She wasn't laughing at full volume so the right people would turn and look. Maria was standing near the kitchen window, holding a glass of sparkling water, gazing out at the city lights below like she was turning something over quietly in her mind. Still, unhurried, completely, uncomplicatedly herself. That was what got him. In a world where most people walk into a room already scanning for who is watching them, there is something almost disarming about a person who simply doesn't need that, who carries their own atmosphere, who is so genuinely at home in themselves that the noise of a crowded room just doesn't reach them. That kind of presence doesn't ask for your attention. It simply has it. Corwin felt it the moment their eyes met across that room. Something settled in his chest that he couldn't name. He just knew he didn't want to lose it. He crossed the room. They talked for 4 hours. By the time the party had mostly emptied around them, neither of them had noticed. He left that night with her number and a feeling sitting quiet and warm behind his ribs. Maria was 30 years old, a pediatric occupational therapist, patient by profession, empathetic by nature, observant in the way that people who spend their days reading children's unspoken needs tend to become. She had grown up in a home where love was not declared loudly. It was demonstrated through sacrifice, through showing up, through presence when presence cost something. Her mother, Betty, had said it to her more than once growing up. A good love is a quiet love, baby. It doesn't need an audience. Maria had built her whole life around that truth. Their courtship moved the way good things do, without rushing, without performance. Corwin brought coffee on slow Sunday mornings. They read in comfortable silence on opposite ends of the same couch. He tried to cook for her early on, and burned rice so completely that the pot had to be thrown away. She laughed until she had to hold the counter. He laughed too, not embarrassed, just with her. That was the thing about those early days. They laughed together, not at each other, never at each other. They married 18 months after that party. Small ceremony, close family. Maria wore a traditional Igbo wrapper layered over a white gown, honoring both worlds she carried with pride. Corwin wore a charcoal suit and stood at that altar and wept when she walked in, not a polite, camera-ready tear, not the kind of cry a man performs because the moment calls for it, the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and involuntary and true. When a man looks at a woman walking toward him and understands fully what is about to become his life. The first 2 years were genuinely, quietly, beautifully happy, and then Corwin got promoted. Hold this feeling, hold it carefully. The man standing at that altar, undone by the sight of the woman he chose. That man is real. That version of Corwin is not fiction. He existed. He felt everything he appeared to feel. The question this story is really asking, the one I need you to sit with as we go forward, is this: what buries a man like that? Because something did, and we are about to watch it happen. The promotion changed Corwin's world in ways he didn't fully account for. New title, new salary, new floor of the building, new colleagues who moved faster, spoke sharper, and expected more from the people beside them. It was the kind of professional leap that feels like finally arriving somewhere you always believed you deserved to be. And Corwin, ambitious, driven, hungry in the way men are when they've been working towards something for years, stepped into it fully. What he didn't step back and examine was the cost of that new world, the late nights that became the norm rather than the exception, the weekend calls that bled into Sunday evenings, the mental real estate that work began occupying in spaces that used to belong to Maria, to their conversations, their plans, their quiet togetherness on opposite ends of the couch. Ambition is not a flaw. I want to be clear about that before we go any further. Working hard, building something, chasing a version of yourself that is better than yesterday, none of that is wrong. But ambition without anchoring, without regularly asking yourself what you are protecting while you climb, that is where the cracks begin. And into one of those cracks walked Briella Vance. Briella was Corwin's new business partner on a high-stakes account that landed in their laps 3 weeks after his promotion. She was sharp in the way that commands a room before she opens her mouth, polished, precise, the kind of professional who makes everyone around her feel like they need to sharpen up. She could hold a boardroom with a single well-timed sentence. She knew it. She used it well. She and Corwin were paired together because their styles complemented each other, his instinct for narrative, her command of strategy. They worked late, 10, 11, sometimes past midnight, fueled by cold takeout and the particular electric energy of people under shared pressure chasing a shared win. They celebrated together when the account moved forward. They vented together when it didn't, shared stress, shared victories, shared laughter in the fluorescent stillness of an emptied office. And right here, I need to stop the story and talk to you directly, because this is the part where a lot of people will say they were just co-workers, nothing had happened yet. And technically, that's true, but I need you to understand something that far too many people learn far too late, when the damage is already done and the person they love is already gone. Emotional intimacy does not care about your intentions. The moment you begin sharing your private fears with someone who is not your partner, when you find yourself lighting up at a name on your phone before you've even read the message, when you're replaying a conversation from the office on your drive home and smiling without knowing why, something has already moved. A line has already been crossed, not a physical one, but the kind that matters more, because it lives in the interior of a person where no one else can see it. You don't have to touch someone to betray your marriage. You just have to start choosing them, in small, quiet, deniable ways, over the person you went home to. Corwin was choosing, slowly, convincingly disguised, even to himself, as professionalism. And Briella was not confused about what she was doing. She made her interest known the way certain people do. Not aggressively, never in a way that could be directly named or confronted. A held gaze that lasted one beat too long. A hand resting briefly on his forearm during a meeting, remembering every small detail he'd mentioned about himself in passing and bringing it back at exactly the right moment. She created a version of Corwin in her presence that felt, to him, seen, admired, chosen. And Corwin, who had quietly stopped being chosen at home, or at least had stopped feeling it, leaned in. Corwin, brother, I need you to stop for a second and be honest with yourself. Because I am watching you, and I see a man who knows exactly what he is doing. Every late night that didn't need to run that late. Every text sent after hours that could have waited until morning. Every moment you chose to stay in that energy. Instead of driving home to the woman who was waiting, you knew you were not lost. You were not confused. You were choosing the comfort of pretending you didn't know. And that is not a mistake. That is a series of decisions. And decisions have weight. Before we go any further into this story, if what I just described is landing for you right now, drop a heart in the comments. Right now, because what I just laid out is not unique to Corwin. It is happening in relationships all over the world, every single day, in offices and DMs and group chats and anywhere two people share enough time and enough pressure to mistake proximity for connection. That is where most love stories end, not in one catastrophic moment, not in a confrontation anyone can point to, in a slow, quiet drift that nobody is willing to call what it actually is, until the person on the other end of it has already made her decision. And Maria was watching all of it. Maria noticed before she was ready to admit what she was noticing. It started with small things, the kind of things that individually mean nothing but collectively mean everything. Corwin's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter while he showered, while he cooked, while they watched television together, now traveled everywhere with him, to the bathroom, to the garage, tucked face down on his nightstand, at an angle she couldn't read from her side of the bed. She noticed that he had stopped reaching for her hand during their evening walks. It had been automatic once, that reach, that easy claiming of her hand in his, the kind of gesture that doesn't require thought because it comes from somewhere deeper than thought. Now the walks happened in a silence that felt different from their old comfortable quiet. This silence had distance in it. She noticed that when he came home, he arrived distracted, present in body, absent in every way that counted. And Maria, who was patient, who was not the kind of woman to fling accusations without evidence, who had been raised to lead with love before she led with anything else, decided to try harder. She planned a weekend away, just the two of them, a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains they had been talking about visiting since before the wedding. She found the listing, mapped the drive, picked the dates. She told him about it over dinner one evening, her eyes bright with the hope of it. He said he was too busy. She cooked his favorite meals, stood in the kitchen on weeknights when she was already tired from a full day of work, making food with care and intention, setting the table properly, putting on music he liked. He came home, sat down, moved his fork mechanically through the plate, eyes somewhere else, somewhere she couldn't follow. One evening she put on the deep green dress, the one he had looked at her in early in their marriage, and said, "Maria, you look like something I dreamed up." She wore it on an ordinary Thursday, did her hair, waited. He walked in, glanced briefly in her direction, and went to check his phone. I need you to feel what that moment cost her. This was not vanity. She was not fishing for a compliment. She was speaking to him in the language they had built together, saying, "I remember us. Do you?" She was reaching across the distance the only way she knew how, with the specific tools of their specific love, and he looked right through her. Do you understand how devastating it is, truly devastating, to be invisible to someone who once saw you so completely that you felt known for the first time in your life? To offer yourself fully and watch it land on someone who is simply not in the room anymore, even though his body is standing right in front of you. Maria lay awake many nights during those weeks, still, staring at the ceiling, pressing her palm flat against her own chest, like she was reminding herself she was still real. She was, but something in her was quietly, carefully beginning to let go. And then, on a Tuesday morning in March, she took a pregnancy test. Positive. She sat down on the bathroom floor slowly, the small white stick held in both hands, and she stayed there for a long time. The tears that came were not simple tears. They were the complicated, layered kind. The tears of a woman receiving the most sacred news of her life at the most fractured moment in her marriage. Joy and grief arriving at the same instant, occupying the same breath. I want you to stay in this moment with me. Don't rush past it. Maria is sitting on a bathroom floor, carrying new life inside her body, and the first feeling that rises alongside the wonder is not pure happiness. It is fear. The quiet, gripping fear of a woman who has been trying to reach her husband for months and suddenly understands that she is about to need him more than she ever has. She wanted to call her mother, She wanted to call her best friend Zuri. She wanted to call someone and let the news out into the world with the joy it deserved. Instead, she washed her face, made herself tea, and decided to wait, to give Corwin the gift of being the first person she told. She was still, even now, choosing him. That evening she lit candles, set the table with care, cloth napkins, the good plates, the ones they saved for occasions. She made jollof rice from his mother's recipe, the one she had asked his mother to teach her specifically because it was his favorite comfort food, the taste of his childhood, the thing that made him feel held. She was not making dinner. She was making a statement. She didn't just cook him dinner that night. She built him an altar. Everything on that table was a sentence in a language she hoped he still spoke. The candles said, "This moment matters." The recipe said, "I have been paying attention to you." The good plates said, "You are still worth the effort." And all of it together said the things she could not bring herself to say out loud yet. "I am still here. I am still choosing you. Please, come back to me." And he walked past all of it, like it was furniture. He came home at 9:30, loosened his tie, looked around briefly, said, "You didn't have to do all this." Not unkindly, but with the flat effect of a man whose mind was clearly parked somewhere else entirely. She sat him down. She took his hands in hers. She looked at him steadily, the way Maria looked at everything she loved, fully, without flinching. "Corwin," she said, "we're going to have a baby. And here is where I need your full attention." Because what happened in the next 10 seconds told the entire truth about where Corwin Hale was living inside himself. He did not pull her into his arms. He did not press his forehead to hers. He did not say, "I love you," or "We're going to be incredible parents," or "Thank God it's you I get to do this with." He did not cry. Not the way he had cried at that altar 18 months earlier when she walked toward him in her Ebo wrapper and her white gown, and he had understood in his whole body what his life was becoming. He went very still. And then he said, "Are you sure?" Narrator, controlled, deliberate. "Are you sure?" Not, "This is the best news I have ever heard." Not, "I am overwhelmed with love for you right now." Not even a simple, human, "Wow." Just, "Are you sure?" "Corwin, I am going to need you to hear yourself." Because that response, those 3 words, were not the words of a man who was surprised by good news. They were the words of a man for whom good news had arrived at an inconvenient time. And the difference between those 2 things is the difference between a husband and a man who happens to share a house with his wife. Maria said yes. She was sure. He nodded, said they'd figure it out, said he was tired, and went upstairs. She sat at that table alone. The candles burned, the jollof cooled, the good plates held food nobody finished, and Maria, who had built an altar and received nothing in return, reached forward one by one and blew out every candle herself. The room went dark. She cleaned the kitchen in silence, put the good plates away, and did not cry. There is a grief too large for tears. When you love someone and you realize, not with a shout, but with a slow, terrible clarity, that the person you have been reaching for is no longer reaching back, that their body is in the house, but their heart has been redirected somewhere else entirely, that grief doesn't come out as sobbing. It comes out as stillness, as a woman, alone in a dark kitchen, pressing her palm flat against her belly, making a promise, quiet, iron, unbreakable. The 6 weeks that followed were, in many ways, the most quietly damaging of the entire story. Not because anything exploded, but because nothing did. Corwin's involvement with Briella moved past the office entirely now. Dinners appeared on his calendar described as client meetings. Weekend mornings when he used to linger in bed beside Maria, scrolling his phone with her head on his shoulder, were replaced with work calls he took in the car, parked in the driveway, windows up. A password appeared on his laptop that had never been there before. New, specific, something she hadn't been given. And Maria said nothing, not because she didn't know, but because she was 12 weeks pregnant, navigating her first trimester largely by herself, and she did not have the energy left, physical or emotional, to fight for a man who was not fighting for her. Let me tell you what those 12 weeks actually looked like for Maria. They looked like 6 a.m., with her forehead pressed against the cool edge of the bathroom sink, waiting for the nausea to pass before she had to get herself dressed and drive to work. They looked like exhaustion so deep it felt like her bones had been replaced with something heavier. The particular, grinding fatigue of early pregnancy that nobody fully prepares you for. They looked like prenatal appointments she drove to alone, sat through alone, and drove home from alone. The ultrasound photo on the passenger seat, nobody in the passenger seat to hold it up and say, "Look at that, look at what we made." She looked at those photos in parking lots, in her car, by herself. Then she put them in her bag and went back to her day. At what point does neglect become a choice? Because I think we need to name that clearly. There is a version of this story where a man is distracted and overwhelmed and genuinely doesn't realize how far he has drifted. I could give Corwin that version, but I won't, because Corwin saw the dark circles forming under Maria's eyes. He passed her in the hallway some mornings and registered, somewhere in the part of himself that was still honest, that she looked like a woman carrying more weight than any person should carry alone. He saw it, and he kept walking. That is not distraction. That is a decision. A quiet, daily, repeated decision to let her carry it, because tending to her would have required him to be present, and being present would have required him to be accountable, and accountability was the one thing he was not prepared to offer. On a Sunday afternoon, Maria's mother called. They spoke in Igbo for a while, easy, familiar, the comfortable rhythm of a language that held their history. Betty asked about work, about sleep, about how Maria was eating, and then, the way mothers do when they are building toward the real question, she asked, "How is Corwin treating you?" There was a pause, not a long one, just a breath, just a single beat of silence, where an answer should have come quickly and didn't. "He is busy," Maria said. Betty heard everything in that pause, and I heard it too. Did you? Because Maria did not say, "He is hurting me." She did not say, "I am struggling," or "I am lonely," or "I am pregnant and invisible, and I blow out my own candles at night." She said, "He is busy." That is what a woman sounds like when she has spent months protecting a man who stopped protecting her, when she has loved someone so consistently, so quietly, so without demand, that even in the moment of her own breaking, her first instinct is to cover for him, to give him the most generous possible framing, to make sure nobody thinks badly of the man she is still, against all evidence, trying to hold together. He is busy. 2 words doing the work of 100. Betty heard every single one of them. Beat. "Maria," Betty said, and her voice carried that particular maternal weight that does not ask permission before it tells the truth. A man who is too busy to hold his pregnant wife's hand is not busy. He is somewhere else. Maria didn't answer. The silence said everything. "Come home," Betty said. "Come home for a while." And Maria, strong, patient, composed Maria, who had been holding herself together with both hands for months, heard those 2 words and felt something in her chest shift. Not collapse, not break, just shift, like a door that had been held shut by sheer will finally allowing itself to move, just an inch. Come home. She was already making decisions she hadn't fully named yet. It was a Friday evening, when the truth finally stopped pretending to be something else. Maria had not been searching. She was not going through his things, not checking his call history, not doing any of the things that people who have already decided to distrust someone do. Corwin had simply left his phone on the kitchen counter. The old habit, briefly returned, and it lit up while she was standing 2 feet away. The name on the screen was a single letter, B. The message beneath it read, "Last night was everything. Miss you already." Maria read it once. Then she set the phone down, face down, very carefully. The way you handle something that has the capacity to detonate. She walked to the kitchen table. She sat down. She placed both hands flat on the surface in front of her, back straight. And she waited. She did not pace. She did not call anyone. She did not rehearse what she was going to say. She simply sat in the stillness of what she now knew. And she waited for him to come downstairs. I want you to notice something about Maria in this moment, because the instinct most of us have when we are blindsided by betrayal is to move, to do something with the shock of it, to let it come out of us in some visible, audible way. Maria sat still. That stillness was not passivity. It was the controlled composure of a woman who had been preparing for this confirmation, whether she had admitted it to herself or not, for a very long time. When Corwin came downstairs and saw her sitting there, hands flat, back straight, something in her eyes that he had never seen before, he knew immediately. the way guilty people always know, before a single word is spoken. He went through the stages the way men in his position tend to, predictably in order, as though working from a script he hadn't written but somehow already knew. First, denial. It's not what you think. The oldest sentence in the history of people being exactly what someone thinks. Then, minimization. Nothing physical happened. Said with one hand raised slightly, as though the gesture itself could reduce the weight of what had been going on for months in the emotional space of their marriage. And then, when Maria looked at him without flinching, without raising her voice, without giving him the reaction that would have allowed him to redirect the conversation toward her emotions rather than his choices, something in him gave way. He confessed, not fully, not cleanly, in the fragmented, qualified way that guilty people confess, offering just enough truth to seem honest while keeping the most damaging pieces back. Corwin, I am going to stop you right there in the middle of that confession and point out the thing you never once said. You did not say, I see what I have done to you. You did not say, I understand what this pregnancy has been like for you, and I have been absent for all of it. You did not say, I am so deeply, specifically, inexcusably sorry. You talked about your stress, your confusion, the pressure you were under. You made the confession about your interior experience and left the woman sitting across from you, 13 weeks pregnant, completely unseen. Again, even in your moment of reckoning, you could not stop making it about yourself long enough to actually look at her. That is not remorse. That is self-management dressed up as honesty. Maria listened to all of it. When he finished, she nodded once, slowly, deliberately, the way someone nods when they have received the last piece of information they needed to make a decision they had already been moving toward. Then she stood up, walked to the bedroom, and began, with quiet efficiency, to pack a bag. Maria, he started. I'm going to my mother's, she said. Don't follow me tonight. Her voice was not shaking. It was not cold. It was simply finished, carrying the particular tone of a woman who has said everything she needed to say and is done spending words on what will not change. He didn't follow her, and the moment she pulled out of that driveway, the moment those taillights disappeared, do you know what Corwin did? He called Briella. Let that sit with you. His pregnant wife just walked out of the house, carrying the weight of everything he had failed to be. And his first move, his first instinct, was to reach for the woman who had helped him get here. Not grief, not shame, not a single moment on his knees in that empty hallway, asking himself what kind of man he had become. He called Briella. Some people show you exactly who they are in the moment when no one is watching. That was Corwin's moment, and he used it to confirm everything. Maria drove to her mother's house. She slept, real sleep, the kind that had been escaping her for weeks. She ate. She let Betty draw a warm footbath and sit beside her and say nothing, simply be there in the ancient, irreplaceable way that only a mother knows how to be. She didn't have to explain everything. Betty already understood most of it. On the second day, she went to her prenatal appointment. She lay on that table, and the technician pressed the wand to her belly, and the room filled with sound. Rapid, insistent, impossibly alive. Her daughter's heartbeat, strong and steady, and completely indifferent to the chaos of the world outside. Maria closed her eyes and listened, and on the third day, from that deep, quiet place inside herself that had never once steered her wrong, she made a decision, not in anger, not in the white heat of betrayal, calmly, completely, irreversibly. Pause. I need you to hear something before we go any further. Maria did not leave angry. She decided, and I need you to understand that those are two completely different things. Angry leaves a door open, because anger burns out, and when it does, people come back. Decided is something else entirely. Decided is what happens when a person has watched, and waited, and tried, and grieved, and finally arrived at a place of total clarity. She didn't leave in a storm. She left in a stillness. And I want to know if you have ever been there. Have you ever had to make a decision like that? Not in a moment of rage, but in a moment of absolute, unshakable clarity. The kind of decision that doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like finally choosing yourself. Tell me in the comments. This conversation needs your voice in it, because Maria's story is not just Maria's story, and we both know it. She returned to the house on a Wednesday morning, while Corwin was at work. She had timed it deliberately. not to avoid a confrontation. Maria was not afraid of confrontation. She timed it because she had already said everything she needed to say, and she did not want the leaving to become a scene. She did not want tears or arguments or last-minute bargaining to cloud something she had decided with complete clarity. She let herself in with her key, stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at the house, their house, the one they had chosen together, the one where they had been happy for 2 years before happiness quietly became a memory neither of them talked about. Then she got to work. She took what was hers, her clothes, her books, the ones with her handwriting in the margins, the ones that had traveled with her since before she knew Corwin's name, the framed photos that held her history, her mother, her grandmother, Zuri, the moments that belonged to her life before and beyond this marriage, the small wooden figurine her grandmother had carved by hand, that had sat on the windowsill in every home Maria had ever lived in. She left the furniture, left the art they had chosen together on weekend afternoons in gallery spaces, back when they still did things like that, left the throw blanket on the couch, left the good plates she had used to set that candlelit table, now clean and stacked and silent in the cabinet. And she left his favorite mug. Did you catch that? She left his favorite mug, not as a message, not as a gesture designed to make him feel something specific. She left it because it was his, because even in the act of leaving, Maria was not trying to wound him. She was not taking inventory of every hurt and making sure he felt the equivalent on his way out. She was simply, carefully, drawing the line between what was hers and what was not, and walking away from everything on the other side of it. That is not anger. Anger would have taken the mug. Anger would have taken several things that weren't technically hers just to make a point. What Maria did was something far more final than anger. She was simply done, and sometimes done is the quietest, most absolute thing a person can be. She left a note on the kitchen counter, 4 sentences, written by hand, in her clear, unhurried script. I loved you with everything I had. I hope one day you understand what that was worth. Take care of yourself, Corwin. Read that again. I loved you with everything I had. Past tense, not a threat, not a plea, just the truth, stated plainly, by a woman who had nothing left to prove and no reason left to perform. I hope one day you understand what that was worth. Not, I hope you suffer. Not, I hope you regret every single day. Just, I hope you understand. The grace in that sentence is almost unbearable. After everything, the ignored dinners, the solo appointments, the pregnancy news met with silence, the text from B, her parting wish for him was understanding, not punishment. That is the measure of who Maria Lister Hale was. She folded nothing, left the note flat on the counter, where he would see it the moment he walked in. Then she picked up her bag, walked to the front door, and pulled it closed behind her. Softly, no slam, no punctuation of rage, just the quiet, definitive click of a latch finding its place. There is a particular sound to a door that closes softly when it should have been fought for. It is somehow louder than any slam could be. A slam means fire still exists. Soft means the fire is out, completely, finally, out. She moved into a small, clean apartment on the other side of the city. On a Saturday 2 weeks later, Betty and Zuri came with boxes and energy and a playlist that refused to allow the day to be sad. They set up the nursery together, Betty hanging curtains while Zuri assembled a small white dresser, and Maria, belly round and present, directed operations from the doorway with the quiet authority of a woman who knew exactly what she was building. Sunlight came through the new curtains. Music moved through the rooms. There was laughter, real laughter, the kind that doesn't need a reason. Maria went back to her full caseload at work. She attended every prenatal appointment. She cooked for herself and slept well and built, day by day, with intention and steadiness, a life that was entirely and completely hers. She did not call Corwin, not once. Corwin came home that Wednesday evening to a house that no longer felt like one. He noticed it before he could name it. Something in the quality of the air, the particular stillness of rooms that have been deliberately emptied of a presence. He walked through the front door and felt it immediately. Not the missing furniture. The furniture was still there. Not the art on the walls. Most of it remained. It was the other things, the small specific things that had been Maria's without either of them ever formally declaring them so. The pale rectangles on the walls where her framed photos had hung, ghost shapes in the paint, the the wall around them slightly darker from years of light falling everywhere else. The windowsill with its ring of dust where the wooden figurine had sat since the day she moved in. The bathroom shelf with its cleaned, deliberate gap. The bedroom with its particular new silence. He found the note on the kitchen counter. He read it once, then again, then a third time and a fourth, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less final on the next pass. They didn't. And then Corwin Hale, marketing executive, 31 years old, a man who had stood at an altar and wept with the full sincerity of someone who understood what he was receiving, sat down on the kitchen floor, slowly, the way a person sits when their legs have simply stopped being able to hold the weight of what they have just understood. I could tell you he was devastated by the loss of his marriage, and he was, but that is not the whole truth of what happened on that kitchen floor. What Corwin felt, what cracked open in him in that moment with 4 handwritten sentences in his hand, was something more specific and more damaging than the loss of a relationship. He felt the loss of himself, the version of himself that Maria had always seen, the man she had looked at on their wedding day, like he was the answer to something she had been quietly carrying, the man who burned rice and laughed about it, and felt completely at ease in his own life because she was in it. That man, the best, most honest version of Corwin, had existed in direct relationship to her presence, and now she was gone. And what remained was just a man who had made a series of bad choices and had nothing to show for any of them. He called her. She didn't answer. He called every day for a week. Some days it rang to voicemail. Some days she sent it there herself, that particular silence of a declined call that communicates more clearly than any words could. He texted, long, earnest messages he rewrote many times before sending, each one trying to find the combination of words that would make her understand how clearly he now saw what he had done. She read them. He could see it. She did not reply. He went to Betty's house. Betty opened the door and looked at him the way women of a certain wisdom look at men who have wasted something irreplaceable and finally realized it. Not with cruelty, but with an honesty that had no interest in softening itself for his comfort. "She is not here," Betty said. "Please," Corwin said. "I just need to talk to her." Betty looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You had years to talk to her, Corwin. You chose silence. Now it is her turn." She closed the door, softly. That door closing softly, for the second time in this story, should have told him everything. Soft doors in this family meant something final. He was beginning to understand the language. Meanwhile, Briella, who had thrived entirely in the electric tension of the forbidden, in the particular energy of a situation that carried no real consequences, felt the atmosphere change the moment consequences became real. She grew distant, then unreachable. The calls went unanswered. The dynamic that had seemed so consuming revealed itself, in the cold light of Corwin's actual life falling apart, to have been built on nothing that could sustain weight. She was gone, and Corwin was alone in every way that actually counted, without Maria, without the version of himself she had reflected back to him, without even the distraction that had helped him avoid facing any of it. Just a man, a kitchen floor, a note with 4 sentences, and the full, unmedicated weight of what he had done. 6 weeks after Maria left, a mutual friend mentioned in passing that she had been spotted at the farmer's market, visibly pregnant. Looking, the friend searched for the right word and landed on it. Peaceful. Peaceful. That word went through Corwin like something sharp. He drove to Zuri's salon, waited until she was between clients. When she came to the front and saw him standing there, her expression said everything. But she let him speak. "Zuri, I just need to know she's okay." "She's okay," Zuri said. "She's better than okay, actually. Can you give her a message? Can you tell her that I—" "Corwin," Zuri's voice was not unkind. It was simply precise. "You need to understand something. Maria is not in a holding pattern waiting for you to get yourself together so she can come back. She is not punishing you so you can earn your way home. She has moved on. She made her peace. If you want any chance, any at all, you cannot show her what you're sorry about. You have to show her who you are becoming. Those are 2 completely different things. Write that down. Apology is the beginning of repair. It is not repair itself. Anyone can say sorry. Sorry costs nothing. Sorry can be deployed strategically, repeatedly, without a single thing changing in the behavior underneath it. What Zuri was describing, what she was telling Corwin he needed to produce, was evidence, not words, not grand gestures, the quiet, consistent, unglamorous evidence of a person doing the interior work of actually changing. And I need to ask you something directly right now, because too many people sitting in this comment section are on one of two sides of this exact dynamic, either waiting for a sorry that is never coming, or handing out sorries that mean nothing because the behavior attached to them hasn't shifted 1 degree. Which one are you? Drop it in the comments. Honestly, this conversation is bigger than Corwin and Maria, and you know it. Corwin heard Zuri. Something in the precision of it cut through the fog of his grief in a way that his own internal monologue had been failing to do for weeks. He stopped calling Maria, stopped texting. He found a therapist, not as a strategy to win her back, but because he genuinely needed to understand how a man who had cried at an altar could become the man who sat on a kitchen floor with a 4-sentence note. He ended things with Briella, fully and finally. He told his closest friend the complete truth, not the edited version, the complete version, and asked to be held accountable. And he wrote Maria a letter, old-fashioned, pen, paper, envelope, not begging, not pressuring, just honest. He named every specific failure. The pregnancy appointment he hadn't attended, the candles she had blown out alone, the way he had said, "Are you sure?" when he should have said, "I love you." He told her his healing was not conditional on her response, that he understood if she never wanted to see him again. He mailed it to Betty's address. Then he put the phone down and waited for nothing. And I'll give him this. When Corwin finally heard it, really heard it, he stopped performing remorse and started doing the quiet, unglamorous, audience-free work of actually becoming different. That counts for something. It does not erase anything. It does not undo a single solo appointment, a single blown-out candle, a single night she spent pressing her palm to her belly in the dark, because the person who should have been there wasn't. But it counts, because becoming is the only direction that was ever going to matter. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Maria found it in the stack of mail Betty had forwarded to her new address, tucked between a utility statement and a card from a colleague, handwritten envelope, her name in Corwin's script, which she recognized immediately and had not expected to feel anything about. She felt something. She made herself ginger tea first, sat down at her kitchen table, the one she had chosen herself, from a small furniture store 2 blocks from her apartment, on a Saturday morning when she had been entirely alone and entirely at peace with that fact. She set the envelope on the table in front of her. The winter sun came in sideways through the window, laying a clean stripe of light across the wood. Her daughter moved inside her, a slow rolling shift, the particular interior language of a child getting comfortable, and Maria placed her hand on the round of her belly without thinking, the way she always did when the baby moved. Instinctive, already maternal, already theirs. Then she opened the letter. She read it once. Then she set it down and looked out the window for a while. Then she read it again. I want to tell you what was in that letter. Not the specific words, those belonged to Corwin and Maria, but the substance of what it contained, because it matters. He named things, not in the vague, general way that people apologize when they want credit for apologizing without the discomfort of being specific. He named the actual things, the pregnancy appointment he had not attended, the cabin trip she had planned and he had dismissed, the candles, the green dress, the dinner table she had built into an altar, and he had walked past without seeing, the 3 words he had said, "Are you sure?" when the only acceptable response to that news, in that moment, from that woman, was love. He named them all. And then he said something that Maria had not heard from him, had not heard from anyone, in the long months of her quiet endurance. In a very long time. He said, I see you. I see exactly what I did, and exactly what it cost you, and I am not asking you to forgive me. I am only asking you to know that you were never invisible to me. I just chose, repeatedly and inexcusably, to look away. Do you understand how rare that is? To have the specific architecture of your hurt acknowledged, not softened, not reframed, not buried under someone else's explanation of why they did what they did, but simply, directly named by the person who caused it. Most people never receive that. Most people spend years waiting for an acknowledgement that never arrives in the form they needed it to. Maria received it on a Tuesday morning in winter, with her daughter moving inside her and the sun coming through the window. She sat with it for a long time, Then she walked to her bedroom, opened the wooden box on her dresser, the one that held her grandmother's earrings, a letter from Betty written on her wedding day, the small things that carried the weight of her most important moments. She placed Corwin's letter inside it. She did not throw it away. She did not throw it away. I want you to understand what that means. And equally, what it does not mean. It did not mean she was going back. It did not mean she had forgiven everything and was preparing to rebuild. Maria was far too clear-eyed for either of those easy readings. What it meant was this: the letter was true, and Maria had always kept things that were true. The box on her dresser held the things that mattered. Not the things that were comfortable, not the things that were easy, but the things that were real. Corwin's letter had earned its place in that company, not as a love story, as a truth. On a night in late spring, Maria went into labor. She called Betty first, who arrived within the hour. Unhurried, prepared, carrying the calm authority of a woman who had done this before and understood that the most important thing she could offer tonight was her presence. She called Zuri, who showed up with a bag already packed and a playlist ready, and the particular energy of a best friend who had been waiting for this night with barely contained excitement for months. The three of them drove to the hospital together. 3 generations of women, mother, daughter, chosen sister, moving through the late-night streets toward the most significant hours of Maria's life. They talked, they laughed, briefly, about something Zuri said that nobody would remember later, but that felt necessary in the moment. They held hands in the elevator. Labor was long. It was hard. Maria moved through it the way she moved through everything, without collapse, without performance, finding somewhere inside herself the reserves that had always been there, deeper than anyone had thought to look. At 3:47 in the morning, her daughter entered the world, healthy, loud, dark-eyed, and extraordinary, already looking, in those first blinking moments, like she intended to take up exactly the space she deserved. The nurse placed her on Maria's chest, and Maria, composed, careful, armored Maria, who had held herself together through months of grief and solitude and the bone-deep exhaustion of building a life while mourning an old one, came completely undone. She wept, fully, freely, without a single wall between her feeling and its expression, the kind of crying that has been held back for so long that when it finally releases, it carries everything with it: the solo appointments, the dark mornings at the bathroom sink, the nights lying awake pressing her palm to her own chest, checking that she was still real, every moment of silent endurance, every choice she had made from that deep, quiet place, all of it released. Betty pressed her lips to Maria's forehead. "You did it," she whispered. "You did all of it." I need you to understand what it cost her to get to this moment. Every appointment she sat through alone, ultrasound photo held in her own 2 hands with nobody beside her. Every morning she gripped that bathroom sink at 6 a.m., waiting for the nausea to pass before she put herself together and went to work. Every night she lay awake in her new apartment, wondering, in the small, honest hours when even the strongest people are allowed to wonder, whether she had made the right choice, whether the life she was building was enough, whether she was enough. And now, here, her daughter on her chest, her mother's lips on her forehead, Zuri somewhere just behind her, crying quietly and pretending not to. All of it made sense, not because the pain was worth it. I will not insult Maria or you by saying that, but because she had walked through every degree of that pain, without letting it make her less, without letting it close her, without letting it convince her that she was not worthy of the life she was building. She had carried everything and arrived here whole. That is not a small thing. That is everything. So let me tell you where they are now. Corwin is in therapy, real therapy. Not the kind a man attends twice and abandons when the discomfort of honest self-examination becomes inconvenient, but the kind where he has been showing up consistently, weekly, doing the interior work that nobody applauds and nobody witnesses. He has contacted Maria, not directly, not in a way that pressures her, but through a carefully worded letter to her attorney, expressing his desire to be a present and accountable father. No demands, no conditions, no timeline imposed on her healing. Just a man making himself available and leaving the terms entirely in her hands. He is not the man he was on that kitchen floor. He is not yet the man he should have been all along. But he is moving, quietly, without an audience, in the only direction that was ever going to mean anything. And Maria? Maria is home, in her apartment, with her daughter, who is healthy and growing and already, by all accounts, entirely her mother's child in the best possible ways. Betty is nearby. Zuri is a phone call away. The community Maria built around herself, carefully, deliberately, one honest relationship at a time, is holding her the way good communities do, with presence, with consistency, with love that does not need to announce itself. She is learning the particular holy chaos of new motherhood. She is sleeping in the broken, interrupted way that parents of newborns sleep, and somehow still functioning with the grace that has always defined her. She is, by every measure that actually counts, not just surviving. She is becoming. I want to close with something, not a summary, not a neat moral tied up with a ribbon, something more honest than that. This story is not really about infidelity. I know that's what the title suggests. I know that's what pulled some of you in, but infidelity was just the surface event, the visible fracture point of something that had been weakening for much longer. The real story, the one I have been telling you this entire time, is about something that happens in slow motion in relationships all over this country, all over this world, every single day. It is about the cost of taking quiet love for granted. Maria loved Corwin without noise, without ultimatum, without performance or condition or demand. She loved him in the way that genuinely sustaining love actually looks, through presence, through patience, through showing up on ordinary Tuesdays with no audience and no recognition and no guarantee that anyone was even noticing. And that is precisely why he stopped noticing. Because here is the thing about steady people, about the ones who love you consistently, who are simply there, who do not threaten to leave every time things get hard. They get mistaken for permanent. Their constancy gets misread as invincibility. You stop treating their presence as a gift because it has never once been withheld. And somewhere in the back of your mind you begin to believe, without ever consciously deciding to believe it, that it never will be. And then one Wednesday, you come home to pale rectangles on the walls and a ring of dust on the windowsill, and 4 sentences on a kitchen counter. And you understand, finally, what permanent actually costs. Corwin learned this on a kitchen floor. Some people learn it too late to do anything with the knowledge. Some people learn it just in time. And some people, and I am speaking now to whoever in this audience needs to hear this most directly, some people are still in the middle of the story, still in the part where the candles are still lit, and the person across from you is still reaching and the door has not yet closed. Those people have something Corwin did not have in time, a warning. So here is what I want you to carry out of this story and into your actual life. The people who love you without noise are not loving you less than the people who love loudly. They are loving you more, because quiet love is the kind that costs something to maintain. It does not run on the adrenaline of performance. It runs on choice, on daily, deliberate, unglamorous choosing of you, of the relationship, of the ordinary moments that make up the actual substance of a shared life. Fight for those people, not when it's dramatic, not when you're at risk of losing them and the fear finally makes you move. Fight for them now, in the ordinary moments, the Tuesday evenings, the prenatal appointments, the candlelit dinners they set for you, because they are still, against all odds, choosing you. Show up for the burned rice, for the slow Sunday mornings, for the simple question, how are you really doing? Asked with enough presence that the person on the other end actually believes you want the real answer. Because one day, and I promise you this is true, you will look back at those ordinary moments and understand that there was nothing ordinary about them at all. They were the whole thing. They were everything. Before I let you go, and I mean this, I genuinely want to hear from you. I have 2 questions for this community. First, at what moment in this story did Maria earn your deepest, most unqualified respect? Was it the bathroom floor? The candlelit table? The bag she packed without raising her voice? The wooden box? Tell me. And second, this one is the harder question, so take your time with it. Is there someone in your life right now who loves you quietly, who shows up without demanding recognition for showing up? And have you told them lately, specifically and out loud, what that has meant to you? Drop your answers below, both of them, because this community was built on exactly these conversations. The ones that start with a story and end with something true about your own life. If this episode moved you, if it made you sit differently in your own relationships, share it with someone who needs to hear it, not for the numbers. Because the right story, reaching the right person, at the right moment, can change something real. I am your narrator. This has been Wounds Among Kin, and I will see you in the next one.